Welcome back. You're still watching SA Today. Now, today, the United Nations Day marks the anniversary of the entry into force in 1945 of the UN Charter, with the ramification of this founding document by the majority of its signatories, including the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. The United Nations officially came into being. For more on this, we're joined from our Pretoria studios by Dr. Ayodele Odusola from the UNDP. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Was killed in detention on the 27th of September 1969.
1945, when this charter came into being. Please take us through how important that day was and perhaps remains in 2019, so many years later.
Thank you very much. The celebration of the United Nations Day, it's a mark of the birth of human rights proclamation by all members of the United Nations. And it is marking what we call human freedom in terms of protection of human rights in all dimensions, wherever they are. The essence is just to preach equality of all people, irrespective of color, irrespective of tribe, irrespective of religion, and irrespective of language. That is one thing that brings everybody together, and that is the goal that the United Nations, organizations, wherever they are, try to preach, and in all countries where we operate. Thank you for celebrating the United Nations Day with us.
All right, so citizens around the world, what should they be thinking on a day like today? Is the United Nations something that affects them daily? Perhaps we don't even realize it.
Thank you very much. The way it is United Nations is created by all countries of the world. And it is a situation where the government of South Africa, for instance, and the people of South Africa are members, our founders. On the basis of this, our intention is just to make sure we promote a kind of good relationship between the government and the people of their respective countries. And the idea to preach that the respect for human rights is really critical in whatever decision we take. I know that some of these things we don't come into the pages of newspapers every day to proclaim what we do, but we do a lot of things through facilitating linkages between government and the people of their respective countries, and at the same time going straight to the government behind closed door and tell them, oh, these are the good things that you are doing, these are the things we need to really build on to really facilitate better results and make sure there's what they call better development outcome to the people of their respective countries. This is what we do. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you.
So 1945 was a very different world that we lived in and what was going on at the time. In 2019, again, a very different world. Would you say that the United Nations has been able to adapt over time? And do you think more change is required to deal with the issues of our time?
Thank you very much. This is one of the things that we have been able to really facilitate as United Nations organizations. First, over the past, between 2000 and 2015, we were able to galvanize the development of Millennium Development Goals, which brought everybody together in terms of having a common agenda, which essentially focused on developing countries. And from September 2015, taking effect from 1st of January 2016, we have what we call the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a kind of ambitious goal that is aiming at promoting people, prosperity, and the planet, meaning we want to make sure we balance the growth in the economic front with the benefit on the social side, and making sure that the economic growth does not jeopardize the environment in terms of what we have in terms of climate change now. We are galvanizing global action to make sure that the world is better for all of us. That's one of the things that the United Nations Development Program, which is one of the development arm of the United Nations system, is promoting across the world where we operate.
All right, well, let's talk about the UNDP, because one of your issues is trying to get rid of poverty, and it doesn't seem like that we're making headway. Give us a sense of what's being done, and if we'll ever get to a point where poverty is eradicated on the planet?
Thank you very much. I know the same question you ask is what many people asked when we started the Millennium Development Goals in the 2000s. And they thought, oh, this is not possible. But on the global average, we were able to, at the end, by December 2015, the world was able to have the number of people that are living below the poverty line, thanks to a few countries, the big countries like China and Brazil, that made this to really come to reality. Our objective is that once a country like China and Brazil could make it, then other countries could make it. And that's why we say by 2030, that's the agenda for sustainable development, which is targeted to end poverty by 2030, is to ensure that we all galvanize action, policy action and program action at all countries where we operate to make sure government focus attention on how to improve the life of the people. And particularly, what we are focusing attention on, that the government should not be carried away by growth alone. We are focusing on growth that benefits the lives of the people on the ground. We are focusing on an inclusive growth, growth that is able to dent poverty, dent inequality, and at the same time provide good jobs for the people, so that the army of youth unemployed that are on the street are fully engaged productively on a daily basis.
So one of the criticisms that I'm sure you hear quite a lot is that the UN often doesn't play fair. When there's human rights abuses on the continent of Africa, sometimes the UN is slow to take action, but if as abuses happen perhaps somewhere in the West, there is more outrage and more movement to fix the issues.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. The issue is not like that, because people tend to really judge United Nations on the basis of what they read in newspapers. What we do underground, we do a lot of underground work with respect to different actors on the ground. We work with civil society organizations to really engage government, engage people to make sure that human rights is something we have to protect. We work with the government in each country where we operate, and we tell them we need to really make sure we put people at the center of development agenda we're doing. Then human rights need to be respected, irrespective of where they come from, whether from irrespective of ethnic group, irrespective of religion, and irrespective of color. This is what we preach on a daily basis with government actors. We may not be coming out on the pages of newspapers, but behind closed door, we tell whoever our main counterpart the truth, the real truths, and say we need to adjust this, we need to do this. And these days too, we're working with the private sector all over the world, and that's why we formed the Global Compact Initiative with the private sector, that we should not be carried away by the single bottom line of making profit, but we have to make sure on the basis of the Sustainable Development Agenda, that have been put in place, has been endorsed by all countries of the world. We need to make sure we focus on three bottom lines. While you are making your profit, you make sure you promote social equity, and at the same time increase the quality of environment where you operate. So these are the kind of things we try to do to make sure the economic growth that our businesses are making does not jeopardize the social equity and does not jeopardize the quality, environmental quality, wherever country where they operate. So we engage them on a regular basis. But in many situations, we don't come to pages of newspapers to really say this is what we are doing. This is what we usually do. That's why you are unable to just say, oh, this is it, on the basis of criticism people have been making. But I just want them to really be very objective. We will always make sure when we get things that from media, for instance, we take it back to the respective constituency and tell them this is the thing that we need to do. And we always discuss with them behind closed door, and at the same time engage them in terms of policy formulation to make sure that the rights of people are not impinged upon, the issue of promoting poverty and promoting elimination of poverty, and making sure the gap between the rich and the poor does not become wider is what we do on a daily basis.
And finally, when will Africa get a seat on the Security Council permanently?
Well, that's why I know our respective ambassadors are really doing an excellent job at this particular moment in New York, and they're working to make sure that there is equity and proportionality because Africa constitutes not less than 27% of the membership of the United Nations General Assembly. And the idea is just to make sure equity is brought to the table when permanent states in the Security Council is addressed. Member states in Africa are really pushing, and some organizations across the world are really pushing to make sure there is adequate representation of Africa in that particular council.
All right, so Dr. Odusola, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and happy UN Day. Thanks so much for your thoughts today. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. All right, so that was Dr. Ayodele Odusola from the United Nations Development Programme speaking to us on UN Day, which we should all be conscious of because they work and function on our behalf.